In this episode of the Toughen Up Leadership Podcast, we're going to talk about accountability. What does that really mean? Does that just mean your ability to blame somebody else or your responsibility to accept blame? Or does it go a little deeper than that? And how do you create a culture of accountability at your workplace? Also, more and more people are returning back to the office. And oh man, we are already annoying each other. There is an article from HR Morning that talks about the 8 major annoyances. How are employees annoying each other when they return to the office? I'm going to give you my take on all that and find out, are these really legitimate annoyances, or have people just become sniveling little crybabies now that they're back in the office? We will dig into all that. And that is the episode. Are you ready for this? Then let's toughen up, Buttercup. Are you looking to finally make that move into management? Or maybe you're already a manager and you're looking at that coveted corner office in the executive suite. Well, the Power, Presence, and Productivity Leadership Program from Sapphire Leadership Advisors can help. In this amazing and comprehensive program, you will learn the fundamental skills and behaviors that are necessary for you to become a strong and powerful leader and get your career moving forward. So don't put off advancing in your career. Take control of your future today. Visit www.sapphireleadershipadvisors.com and learn more about this amazing program and the opportunities that it would present to you to get your career on the fast track. Okay, welcome to the Toughen Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Jason Kistler. So excited to be with everybody today. Got a great show, and I think it's a great topic to start off the new year with, accountability. Because if there's one thing that a leader can make a point to change in the new year, it's how they view accountability and how they incorporate that into their own leadership style. What is accountability really? Most people, they just use this word to indicate a direction to point blame. So if you're accountable, that means that if something goes wrong, it's your fault, right? That's the way a lot of people think of that. But really, accountability goes a lot deeper than that. It's a frame of mind that you are not reactive, but a proactive approach to how you deal with problems, issues, etc. It really is a complete difference in the way you think about things. So I think the biggest shift in the way you think is really in accepting 100% accountability for everything that happens to you in your life. And that is a tough pill to swallow, because most people say, well, I didn't have any control over that. How am I supposed to be accountable for something that I didn't have any control over? Here's the true meaning behind accountability, is to be able to examine a situation and understand what aspects you had control over. You may not have had control over every single possibility of this outcome, but you had some influence. You exist, you're involved. So there's something that you could have changed, could have done differently. And the concept of really having that thought process of, don't just look at things as happening to you, but look at things as, well, happening for me. How can I take this, whatever happened, and turn it into a positive, learn from it, and move forward from it? That is real accountability. Mindset is really important as a leader, because you're responsible for things now that you don't actually do yourself. You have a team that does this work. And so how well you manage that team, how well you delegate, how well you keep track of projects, that's all part of your contribution and your accountability. But ultimately, you're not the one that does the work. So a lot of new leaders will get into positions and say, well, but my team didn't do this. I couldn't get this done because my team was too slow or my team was confused. That is where leaders, true leaders, step in and say, I am accountable because either I didn't communicate it well enough to the team. I didn't make sure that it was understood. I wasn't managing or delegating properly. And so that's why. It has nothing to do with the team. And this also goes beyond just your team, because once you move into the realm of executives, now the accountability goes beyond just your team, but your company. And there are so many things out there that can change the way your company is run, how successful it is. You can even go as far as to say, well, the market completely changed. I mean, COVID is a perfect example. Nobody expected that. But should they have? Should there have been a plan in place for something like that? That's accountability. When you start thinking that way and stop just saying, well, there's nothing we could do about it, we didn't know, but start changing the way you think to say, could we have actually prepared for that? Could we have had an emergency plan in place? Could we have done these different things to get a different outcome? And like I said, that is real accountability. And that's what powerful and strong leaders have. Now, how do you bring a culture of accountability to your workplace? Well, the first and easiest way to do that is anytime you want to see a change in somebody else, you really have to make that change in yourself. So if you want your team to have more accountability, then you need to be more accountable. Because I guarantee you, when you start accepting accountability on a regular basis and your team sees it, they're going to look at that and they're going to start emulating that behavior. They're going to start saying, well, actually, no, it was me. I need to do this differently, or, I need to change this, because they'll see you always taking accountability. And they will examine that and say, wait a minute, that was actually me. I should step up and I should be accountable for that. So hopefully that makes sense. It really is a powerful mindset shift that a lot of executives have to make, because it's not just accountability on a team basis anymore. You're effectively accountable for the success of the company at that point. And so it's not a choice, really. You have to make that mindset shift. Otherwise, you won't be a successful executive. So moving on from accountability, I'm actually going to enjoy this one because I read this article and I had to laugh, because some of the things on there I totally get. Some of the things, I'm not so much, but it is funny how this was the topic of an article from HR Morning, and I'll put the link in the notes so that you can check this out yourself. But it's funny that already, and they even say in the article that the capacity, in-office capacity, is only maybe 50 or 60% of what it was, pre-pandemic. But even still, people are already knocking on HR's door constantly about being annoyed by coworkers. And this really comes from the fact that everybody's been at home during COVID. And so the rules of the game are so much different when you're working out of your home office. As long as you weren't on camera, you could wear whatever you wanted, your robe, nobody knew, nobody cared. And you could do different things, maybe annoying habits to other people, like, even listening to music at whatever volume you wanted. Who cared? As long as you weren't annoying your family. And that's the big thing too, is that a lot of people, if they did have offices, they were rooms. And so you could separate almost as if you had your own office at your workplace. But a lot of people, when they go back into the office environment, they're in these open work areas. So there is no boundaries anymore. Everybody's in a giant room, a cubicle farm or wherever it is that you work. So you're having to deal with people that are around you all the time. So based on this apparently rough transition back into the office, HR Morning compiled a list of the top 8 complaints that they've been receiving. And, I don't actually work in an office myself anymore, but I did. And so I can see each one of these as potentially an annoyance. But at some point you have to think, well, just let it go. Is it really that big of a deal that you have to go to HR, you have to make a complaint about it? So that I'll let you decide. But I did want to go over each of these and give my take on these just to kind of have a little bit of fun with it. So the first one on the list is the infamous fridge. Now, they don't include kitchen or microwave in here, but I'm going to throw that in because just from my days of working in an actual office, I remember a couple of things. First of all, when you were cooking something in the microwave and people didn't cover it and stuff exploded, and so you go to use the microwave and it's just covered with nastiness. And it's to me, that's annoying because people are not taking the time to care about something that's not theirs. When they're home, they might make more of a point to cover things up so that they don't blow up in the microwave because they would be the ones that would have to clean it. But in an office scenario, everybody always looks at, oh, well, this is probably just this is the cleaning service that deals with this. Well, no, usually there's an employee that ends up having to do that at some point. And also with the kitchen area, the smell that comes out of that sometimes used to drive me crazy because some of the more obscure meal types that are being made, reheated, heated, whatever it is, wafts through the whole office. And if it's a smell that's not that pleasant, then you're dealing with it for the next 30 minutes. The worst one was always people that burn popcorn. I mean, that just goes to the whole office and it smells horrible. Now, in the HR Morning article, they talk about the fridge and how people leave food. They just leave it in there. It's unmarked. People steal other people's food. The reference to Friends with Ross and his sandwich in the refrigerator, and his boss ends up eating his sandwich and he finally catches him and he loses his mind. I mean, that's just an extreme example of the way that people look at the fridge. So that's the first one, dealing with what's in the fridge. Do you leave it in there? Do you label it? Are people stealing from the fridge? That's a big annoyance. So apparently this is something that's worthy enough that people are going to HR and complaining about the fridge. All right, moving on to number 2 is work attire. Now this, I can definitely see. I think people got really comfortable working in shorts and t-shirts and slippers or flip-flops. And that was never really acceptable in an office before the pandemic. Almost everywhere that I ever worked was business casual. So, a decent pair of slacks, some kind of shoes other than tennis shoes or sneakers, and then some kind of usually a button shirt or something. And this is for men, obviously, but it was the business casual attire was what everybody essentially wore into the office. And then some people had business professional, which was, a tie. Now, because there's so much tension behind going back into the office, that employers are trying to make the transition easy for everyone. And what it does is, for the people who really like casual, they're happy with it. But for the people that don't, it's uncomfortable. I don't necessarily want to see people in yoga pants, showing up to work in a rock concert t-shirt and sweatpants. That's not really professional attire. And I truly believe that the motto of dressing for success, that you dress and you feel successful. I know that has become less popular these days, but look at the quality of the work these days, and I still say that there's something to that. But apparently this, again, is enough that people are going to HR and complaining about people's work attire. Now, to me, this seems like really a non-issue if your employee handbook specifies the dress code, and there really shouldn't be an issue here. But apparently people are at the point now where they're fighting back against the dress codes and saying it is not necessary, if we don't have any customer interaction, that we have to dress as business casual. Okay, number 3 is noise. Now, the article summarizes noise in an interesting way. The noise that they reference is nail clipping, change jingling, belching, and then there's a reference to behaviors that were acceptable at home, and then also otherwise just strange behaviors. They didn't really go into that, which I think there might be a story behind that, but the idea of, again, you're bringing the casualness of being at home into the office, and so you're doing things, you're talking about personal stuff loudly, you're making a lot of noise. Some people have developed nervous tics, so now they're constantly tapping on desks, tapping their feet, moving their legs. These are all things that apparently, again, are significant enough that people in HR have been documenting that these complaints are increasing. Now, this is one of those ones where I feel like some of these may be legitimate complaints. I mean, if somebody's constantly having very loud conversations about personal topics, I could see that being something legitimate here. But some of these other things, it really goes down to focus. Focus on your own stuff. Don't pay attention to all the distractions that are around you. If you have to, get some noise canceling, earbuds or something, so that you're not being distracted by all that, because people are going to make noise. And how often have you been sitting at your desk and somebody is constantly moving around and the way that they move, their clothing is noisy? I mean, I've seen that a ton of times. Are we really going to go to HR about somebody's noisy clothing? I think this one is a little bit on the crybaby side. I'm just saying. Now, number 4 is kind of related to number 3, but I would say a little bit of an extension of it, but movement. Now, they classify this in a couple of ways. They include some of the fidgeting that I had mentioned before in number 3, tapping, fidgeting, but they also include an interesting concept that people are annoyed by the pace of other people, which is interesting, because if you've ever been behind a crowd of people that is moving so slow because they're just occupied with their own conversations, you got people that are holding up an elevator because they're in the middle of a conversation. So these are what I would classify as part of this movement category. Again, I think this is crybaby territory right here, because this is just part of life. You got to deal with this kind of stuff. People are all different. They all walk at different speeds. Sometimes, yes, it's annoying to be behind a crowd of people that's moving really slowly and talking as if no one else is around. But is that an HR-worthy conversation? No. All right, moving on to number 5. This one I absolutely agree with. Number 5 is gossip. If there is one thing that is one of the most toxic behaviors at work, it is gossip. There's really no place for it in a professional environment, but unfortunately we are humans. So, gossip surrounds certain people. Now, this is, and I want to point back to accountability in this item, because when I talked about that earlier, this is part of this accountability. When you start questioning, why are things happening to me? And what I notice is that a lot of people that involve themselves in drama then turn around and cannot understand why all the drama happens to them. So I think that this is a good item to point back to. Here's what you mean when you're talking about accountability. Yes, when you are questioning why things happen to you examine what your role is in it. If you're involved in a lot of gossip and you tend to thrive off of drama, then guess what? You're going to get drama, and it's not always going to be a good thing. But for this one, gossip, I think it's a question of the people that love gossip don't care. But the people that can't stand gossip are the ones that this drives them crazy. And again, this is a legitimate issue, I would say, is that there should be something in place to say you need to tamp down on the gossip. We don't need gossip here. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's unhealthy and it's toxic. Now this one I love. Number 6 is smell. So now this could be simply someone who wears too much perfume. Now that's the fairly innocent version of smell that people might have a problem with. Too much perfume. You know it is, the people that walk in and you can smell them, 3 offices down. Oh, here comes so-and-so. I can smell their perfume or their cologne. But I think the funny part of this is the flip side of that, which is the, bad smell. Because maybe people's hygiene changed a little bit when they didn't have to go into an office. So maybe they didn't shower as much as they should. And so now they're back in the office and they just don't smell good. Now, apparently, and HR Morning makes reference to a you stink conversation, or they called it the dreaded you stink conversation. Now, me personally, because I don't work in HR, I have never had to have a you stink conversation with anybody. I'm very glad that that's the case, but apparently that's a thing in HR. The dreaded you stink conversation. Yeah, Jones, we really need to talk with you about your smell. A lot of people are complaining. You've got animals following you around. The paint is coming off the walls in your office. We really need to do something about that. Number 7 is rudeness. Now, this is something that I feel is a combination of a lot of people just not having patience anymore and people just throwing etiquette out the window because having to work from home. So I definitely think that rudeness is an issue, and it really depends on the person, obviously. Not, some people are outwardly rude and they become difficult to work with. And that is something that's, that's been around for a while. I mean, that's a lot of where HR discussions really start is, so-and-so is nasty to people, so-and-so does this. That's a typical rudeness conversation. But now, when people come back into the office after the pandemic and they've been stuck at home for a year and a half or however long it's been that they were before they came back into the office. And so now they've just lost some of the social skills that are necessary to interact civilized with other people. So rolling your eyes, not paying attention to people, interrupting people. These are all things that are considered rude, but I also think they're a matter of etiquette. It's not that people necessarily intend to be mean, but that they just don't understand that some of the soft skills they're missing are really abrasive to other people. So I think that this is a matter of really getting back into interacting with people. When you're forced into a civilized environment, which is an office, then you have to play by the rules. Otherwise, you just won't do well there. And then you'll end up either losing your job or you'll get frustrated and you'll go to another job and you'll find out, hey, this new job, it's the same thing. Everyone keeps saying I'm so rude. I don't understand it. So this is a big thing, I think, that leaders have to be very aware of, because when they step into a leadership position and they have to interact with people more often, they've got to have those soft skills. And so rudeness is definitely an issue. And I don't think it's just the pandemic. I think there's a certain mentality shift that's coming, unfortunately, into the corporate world. And so a lot of newer, younger workers are having an issue with some of these soft skills that they've just never developed. Now, the last one, number 8. This one's kind of funny too. And I remember this from working in these cubicle farms where you really have no privacy. you're constantly hearing people around you. And so the last one is TMI or TLS, which I've never seen TLS before, but apparently that is too little space. So this is two things. TMI, obviously we know what that is. Too much information. I can't tell you how many times I've had the misfortune of overhearing someone's conversations about their sexual conquests over the weekend, or how drunk they got and puked off of a balcony, and all these other things. And that's just information I don't need. I don't really want it. I don't think most people want that information. Now, the too little space, that's interesting because I think that the pandemic has brought out the germaphobe in everybody. And so I feel like a lot of people have never truly come all the way back to pre-pandemic comfort. I know a lot of people that won't shake hands anymore. They did before, but they don't now. And so I think a lot of this may be post-pandemic side effects. You really have this concept of spreading germs and not wanting to be a part of that anymore, trying to be as innocuous as possible. So I think that this might be that a side effect of that, in addition to some people are just not comfortable being that close to people, and there is a certain level of personal space, and some people, based on the way they were brought up, don't have any understanding of that. It's not that they're intentionally trying to make people uncomfortable, but it's that this is how they interact with people. There are certain people that are very touchy. When they're talking, they want to put their hand on you. They want to touch your shoulder, your arm, and that's one of those things where you really have to understand and be aware of other people's comfort level. And so in this scenario, when you're working in an office environment, I would just err on the side of caution of really putting your hands on anybody. I don't think it's necessary to communicate a point to touch someone. I mean, shaking hands is fine, but really, I don't need to touch your arm to make a point. Whew, so that was an interesting list. Now, I would say I'm probably 50% legitimate, 50% crybaby on these items. But here's the one thing I'll end with, is that I really feel like I could summarize all of these 8 items in one skill that people are losing, and that is patience. I think almost all these problems would be solved if you had more patience, because so many people are so selfish now that patience they feel is not worth it. It's all about them, what makes them comfortable. And so the things that make them uncomfortable that are done by someone else, they may very well do the same things. It's not comfortable when other people do it, but if they do it, they don't care. So I really feel like this is a skill that everyone, leaders, individual contributors, anyone needs to really focus on, is have some patience. Understand that everybody's a little different. Everybody's just trying to go in and do their job and be good at what they do, get the recognition, move up in their career, or maybe they're happy where they are. But try to remember that people are on the same team. And so even though you have differing viewpoints, you're trying to work towards the same goal. And hopefully that really can help this transition back into the office not be so burdensome on HR. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you again next week. Until then, have an amazingly productive week.